Hi everyone, I hope you all are great. Today we will have simple compound complex and compound complex sentences. First, you have to log in using the aplusstudent.com. Click on your name, move on to language at the grade 7. Chapter is simple compound complex and compound complex sentences. Lesson is identify dependent and independent clauses. Is the sentence simple compound complex or compound complex? Okay. All right, so a clause is a group of words that contains both a subject and a predicate. Okay, so it has the subject and then it has a predicate. An independent clause is a complete thought. It can stand alone as a sentence. Okay, so when you have a complete thought, it is an independent clause and it can stand alone. And then a dependent clause is not a complete thought, it cannot stand alone as a sentence. Okay. Let's pick up some sandwiches from Pete's Cafe. Now, the clause can stand alone, it's an independent clause. After Kelvin gets off work, now this clause cannot stand alone, it is dependent because what happens after Kelvin gets off work? So we have a complex sentence is made up of an independent clause and a dependent clause. So that's what you have for complex sentences. It has dependent and the independent clause. The dependent clause in the complex sentence usually begins with a subordinating conjunction or a relative pronoun. All right, so the dependent clause usually begins with a subordinating conjunction or relative pronoun. We have either this one's after, although, as, because, before, if, since, unless, until, when, and while. So all these are subordinating conjunctions, and then the relative clauses are that, which, who, whom, or whose. Okay. So let's pick up some sandwiches from Pete's Cafe after Kevin gets off work. So the dependent clause begins with the subordinating conjunction, which is after. During his trip to Italy, Tony visited the Trevi Fountain, which is in Rome. So you can see that the dependent clause begins with the relative pronoun which. Alright, so let's look at some examples. Select the dependent clause. So we have because they enrich the soil and are free of harmful chemicals. All right, so let's go to the test and you can share your answers with me, okay? So we have select the independent clause. Is it the first or second? The expertise of entomologists is critical to agriculture since insects can damage or completely destroy crops. Is it the first or second? The independent clause. So we have the first one. Then, independent clause. Although activist Susan B. Anthony fought diligently for women's suffrage, women cannot vote until more than a decade after. Could not vote until more than a decade after her death. Is it first or the second one? So we have independent clause. We have the second. Okay, the first one is although it starts with a subordinating conjunction. So independent, is it the first or second? When locusts corrugate into huge swarms, they can devour millions of pounds of plants in a single day, first or second. Alright, so the independent, we have the first one. So dependent clause, although government ingredients such as oyster, eggplant, and artichoke hearts have gained popularity in recent years, the most people the most popular pizza topping in the United States is still pepperoni. So is it the first or second? So we have the first one. Okay, so next we have dependent clause. Before he became the 39th president, Jimmy Carter had been a peanut farmer, first to second. So the dependent clause, we have the first one because it starts with the subordinating conjunction. So dependent, so farmers organic fertilizer because some farmers prefer organic fertilizer because they reach to sell and are free of harmful chemicals. First to second. So we have the first. Alright, Josephine, a wealthy socialite and inventor, designed the first dishwasher because her servants were damaging her good china. Independent, first or second. So independent, we have the first one. Then the independent also. The majestic live oak tree doesn't produce cones until it has achieved approximately 20 years of growth. First or second acorns rather. So independent, we have the first. All right, that's it for this lesson. We'll move on to the next one, okay? So make sure you complete this lesson if you haven't done it. All right? So the second we have is the sentence simple compound complex or compound complex, okay? So we know that a clause is a group of words that contains both the subject and a predicate, and then an independent clause is a complete sentence or complete thought that can stand alone. Then a dependent clause is not a complete thought and cannot stand alone. Usually the independent begins with the subordinating conjunction or the relative clause. So next we have the simple sentence. Now the simple sentence made up of a single independent clause because it can stand alone. We have Ben and I spent all day relaxing by the pool. And then some simple sentences have introductory phrases, but the introductory phrases is part of the predicates. So in the winter, Ben usually wears his heavy coat, or Ben usually wears his heavy coat in the winter. Alright, so the compound sentence is made up of two independent clauses joined together by a coordinating conjunction such as and, but, or, and then so. So we saw the flash of lightning, and seconds later we heard a rumble of thunder. Okay, so we have a complex sentence. So we know that complex sentence made up of independent clause and dependent clause. Okay, and then the dependent clause cannot stand alone, while the independent clause can stand alone because it's a complete thought. So basically, the dependent clause begins with what? Subordinating conjunction or relative pronoun. So we have if she ever gets a chance, Terry would love to visit the Egyptian pyramid. Okay, so a compound complex sentence is made up of two or more independent clauses and one or more dependent clause. So basically, the compound complex has either two or more independent or one or more dependent. Okay, so after Samantha left work, she stopped at the bank and then she went to the gym. So you can see that we have the dependent and then two independent. Sometimes the dependent clause in a complex or compound complex sentence can interrupt an independent clause. So sometimes it can interrupt it. Just like all cars that are kept in captivity often have bent dorsal fins. Okay. Which type of sentence is this? Annual plants survive only one season and must be replaced each year, but perennial returns each year with new flowers and foliage. So, of course, this is a compound sentence. It has a coordinating conjunction and also a comma. Okay, so let's go to the test and you can share your answers with me. Okay, so we have what type of sentence is this? The platypus has venom producing glands, which are rare among mammals, but its venom is not generally lethal to humans. First to second. Alright, so we have what? Compound complex. Annual plants survive only one season and must be replaced each year, but perennial return each year with new flowers and foliage. First or second? So we have compound sentence. Then Russia has a variety of natural resources, including oil, natural gas, timber, iron ore, copper, and lead. First to second. So we have simple. Then Aaron has an unconventional swing, but he manages to drive the ball higher than some professional golfers. Is it first or second? So we have compound. Then, since it takes approximately 1,000 years for a used printer cartridge to decompose, recycling this plastic ink dispensers helps the environment. First to second. So we have compound or complex. Okay, rather complex. So after parrotfish eats algae covered coral, the coral travels through the fish's digestive system and then it decomposes in the reef as white coral sand. First to second. So what do we have here? We have compound complex. If we can't find an inexpensive hotel for the 4th of July weekend, we can always stay with my parents first or the second. So we have complex. All right. So at Christopher. As Christopher sat down on the rickety old chair, it abruptly collapsed beneath him, first or second. So we have complex sentence. Alright, that's it for our lesson today under simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. Can you tell me if you have any questions? Alright, since we have no questions, we'll end here. Complete this lesson if you haven't. See you next time. Bye.